Welcome to the second part of In Touch Crime Beat, where we talk about criminal justice stuff. I'm Officer Don with Commonwealth Attorney Ray Larson, and we're gonna discuss the homicide rate here in Lexington and the crime rate. And by the way, it's up, so we're gonna talk a little bit about that. That's important news. But first thing I want to get to is, Ray, you and I have prosecuted a lot of cases together. A lot of high-profile cases, at least a couple. And one of the things that you always drill into investigators and your prosecutors is keep your mouth shut, because it's human nature to want your 15 minutes in the sun, right? Everyone wants that. But the reality of it is that can cost a case. And I'm bringing to attention this sheriff. It's Pima County Sheriff Clarence Dumpnick, who is basically doing all he can, in my opinion, to destroy the case against this nutcase in Arizona that shot all those people. Why is it important that this guy keep his mouth shut as an investigator? Or is it even appropriate for him to be talking like this?
Well, what he's doing is setting the stage for a defense. If he says that this guy was mentally ill, or if he says this guy was crazy, or if he says that this guy was a nutcase like you just did, then what he's doing is basically making a lay person's diagnosis of a person's mental state, and a mental state is all part of the proof of a case. And we've had cases in our community where an investigator has, all of a sudden there's a TV camera in their face and they're asked about somebody and they say, well, he was just acting crazy. Well, all of a sudden that means that we now have to have this guy examined and evaluated for his mental condition, because that's out there and we have to basically disprove what somebody has said.
Especially when it's an investigator, because now that investigator will be called to basically testify for the defense.
If I were defending the case out in Arizona, I'd call this guy and say, okay, you said that essentially said he's crazy.
And he's been influenced by others, it's not his fault, blah, 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 blah.
Tell us what facts you have that lead you to that conclusion. And, and away you go, because lay testimony about a person's behavior is admissible as it goes to mental state.
But the sheriff, the high sheriff of a county like that, to a juror may not be considered a lay person, even though he doesn't know anything about psychiatry or any of that. It's still, he's the person who basically is in charge of this investigation, who's responsible for the investigative aspect of this, to take it to be prosecuted. And it's just so unprofessional to talk about that. I mean, even it's hard not to show your emotions in these cases. I've worked cases before where, I'm just generally just pissed off at what this person has done to another person. It's very upsetting because you have to know the very intimate details of what these criminals do, but you can't. You've got to keep your eye on the ball and the big picture.
What is it that you always hear Larson say? This is a pending case, and it's the policy of our office not to discuss pending cases. Here's the deal. We'll talk to you about procedure. You got questions about the court procedure, we'll talk about it. You want to know about the facts? Come to the trial. It's as simple as that. We don't talk about pending cases, because nothing good can happen when you do that, and it is.
Well, you also owe it to. Of course, we don't owe anything. You don't owe anything to this defendant. I don't feel like we owe anything to this guy. He's awful. But from the legal justice standpoint, you, as a prosecutor, owe it to every person that comes before you to make sure they get a fair trial, and that you don't try to manipulate it in the media, and that you don't try to manipulate jurors outside of that courtroom. You want to present them with the truth and not your speculation. I mean, that's your responsibility. Now, the defense, all bets are off. There really is to me, there's no rhyme or reason about what they do. They'll say whatever they want, whatever it takes. They'll throw mud, they'll lie.
They've got some limitations, too, ethically. They've got some ethical limitations on what they can say about a case. And if, for example, I can remember when we were getting ready for the Shane Ragland case, if you'll remember, Amy Lloyd came in and testified before the grand jury. And And one of the defense attorneys made the comment, well, nobody can trust her word. She's not credible.
To the media, yeah.
Yeah, said that to the media. Well, that's ethically improper based on our standards of professional responsibility, even for defense attorneys. And what I did was make a motion that said that this is a violation of the Code of Professional Responsibility. Well, the next thing you know is that guy was out of the picture until the trial, because he got caught. And that's
well, but we do know that part of a defense scheme is to play things in the media as much as they can, and we just know that. And it may be because the defendant is watching and the defendant's family's watching, and they want to be yeah or whatever. But they do that, and the prosecution, if they're smart, they do not. You know, and there have been cases we've seen where the prosecution did not follow that standard, like the John Benet Ramsey case, that little girl was killed. That's a classic example where you had prosecutors talking about the case, doing interviews before the conviction, before they even arrested anyone, and not for the purpose of trying to get information. It's one thing to talk about a case to try to get information, but they were speculating, and it really destroyed that case. And
I'll tell you a worse example is the Duke Lacrosse case, where that prosecutor, his name was Mike Nifong, started talking about the guilt of people. These people are guilty of rape, he said. Guilty of this, guilty of that. Well, of course, as it turns out, they weren't. And he was not only disbarred, he was charged criminally and is a subject of any number of lawsuits because he violated the Code of Professional Responsibility about talking about the guilt or innocence or credibility of a witness or a defendant, that sort of thing. You just can't do that.
well, and there's no such thing as an open and shut case, which we found out there's just not. It doesn't. There's all these I call them technicalities. You may not like that word, but I do. I mean, to me, it's yes, someone's guilty, but okay, technically, what technicalities can they get off on? And we see it time and time again. And this sheriff is laying the foundation for that. If he's not careful, we want to all see. We basically want to see this guy put down for what he has done. I can say that I'm not part of the case. I'm just a person. But the people who are that close to the case or involved are supposed to handle it more professionally. And this guy's going to screw this thing up if he's not careful. That's another thing I want to. The attorney that's defending this guy has also defended a lot of other terrorist type creep people. And is it myth?
So how do you feel about
Is it a myth that defense attorneys have to take cases, or are you allowed to turn down a case? Do you have to, if you're an attorney, do you have to take a case? Do you have to take a case of a child molester or a killer?
No.
So you can pick and choose. If you don't want to defend someone, you don't have to.
Well, if you're appointed, there's a difference between private defense attorneys and public defenders. In this instance, I think this woman is a private attorney that practices criminal defense. You don't have to take a case. If you're appointed as a public defender, you got it. You have to do it.
And you can't say my conscience won't allow me.
Well, I guess you could, and they'd appoint somebody else. Okay. I guess you could.
It's still your choice. That's my point. You hide behind that. Well, I have no choice. That's just not true. If you're standing with somebody, you're standing with them, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
There we go. I'm done with that. All right. Crime rate in Lexington.
Well, the crime rate in Lexington has gone up for 2010 as compared to 2009 by about 7.5%, a little more than 7.5%. And Officer Don, it's driven by these property crimes. 85% of the crime that occurs in Lexington are property crimes, not violent crimes. Property crimes include burglary, include breaking into your car and stealing your GPS device or tape, whatever the player is that you got working.
Don't have tape players much anymore. Yeah. Listen, they're not